Hello world of YouTube and welcome to my next discography review, the segment where I take a look at an artist catalog, talk about some of the EPs sometimes, and rank the LPs and give you a roadmap to get yourself through an artist catalog depending on what types of music you enjoy. Today, I'm going to be talking about the 7 albums from the rock band Queens of the Stone Age. Now, I like these guys quite a bit. If you caught my some of my videos... If you've caught some of my videos in the past, I've given praise to some of their work. I think that they are a talented batch of musicians no matter who's in the band. I think Josh Homme has this really haunting voice that I think he utilizes to great effect. I'm also a Kyuss fan, so I like a lot of what this musician and some of the musicians that have been in this band's catalog a lot. I think that they provide some really good shit. And this list wasn't necessarily hard to put together, but I do have some hot takes waiting in the wings. So let's go ahead and dive right in. They have a few EPs that they've released in their time, and I feel like the only one worth noting is the split one with Kyuss, but even that I wouldn't say is anything worth discussing outside of maybe it's an interesting dive if you are a fan of Queens of the Stone Age and want to see them do a split with Kyuss for some reason. So like some of the other bands I've covered on this channel, this band doesn't necessarily have a bad album in their midst, but this isn't necessarily a contentious opinion that this is one of their weaker outings. I like this record a tremendous amount, but it almost feels like an adjustment period for the band. Like in my Mars Volta review where I said that D-Louz and the Comatorium almost feels like the Mars Volta trying to find their identity by shedding the skin of At the Drive-In. This almost is of a similar ilk, but it's Queens of the Stone Age trying to shed the Kyuss skin. A lot of the production sounds on here and some of the guitar tones feel like they're trying to adapt the Kyuss sound into something different. And I don't mind that at all. I actually fucking adore this record. I think the Open a Regular John is a great, tight, catchy rock cut. I love the riffage on Avon and How to Handle a Rope. I think they do a good job of keeping the pace dynamic in its own way. It just has the least sort of experimentation in its midst when looking at the entire Queens of the Stone Age discography as a whole. It feels the most kind of plateaued record in their catalog, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I feel like they were starting off on a safe foot on this record, and I think it's fucking great. It still has a lot of tight musicianship. I think Josh Homme still does a great job vocally at delivering some good moments, and I think that this is a record with its own standouts, but it's one that I feel like is more for diehards. I would get to this record if you like the sounds on, say, Rated R or Songs for the Deaf or even elements of Lullabies to Paralyze. If you like those records, you'll enjoy the debut, just maybe not as much as those. But it's still something that I feel like Queens of the Stone Age fans should sink their teeth into at some point because it has all of the sounds of Queens of the Stone Age. It's just in a really harsh genesis here. Yeah, I'm still coming in with some hot takes. I like Lullabies to Paralyze a lot. I just think it's just a little lengthy. I think it starts off really well and it has some fantastic cuts in the beginning, like Tangled Up in Plaid and Burn the Witch, and of course Little Sister is a stellar single. But I feel like as the record goes on, while I like some of its longer moments like Someone's in the Wolf and The Blood is Love, I feel like it doesn't have the pacing of a lot of the records of theirs that I really enjoy. I think that the more focus on drearier soundscapes was a nice sonic shift, and like their debut, laid the groundwork for some records of theirs down the road that I think are much better at achieving a similar atmosphere. But I think that this is still a stellar record. If you liked some of the drearier moments on Songs for the Deaf, or if you've heard some of their newer stuff like Clockwork, or some of the drearier sounds on Villains, you'll like Lullabies to Paralyze a lot. It did a lot to shift the band's sound in a slightly different direction, and I think it was partially due to some of the lineup changes. They didn't have Nick Oliveri in the band anymore, and so they shifted their sound a little bit and retooled it in a way that I think still stayed true to their roots, and that's why I really like this record a lot, and I think it's fantastic, but it's not as good as the stuff that they would go to craft later on in their career.
Write down a revolution is one spin.
Like I said in my year-end wrap-up, people are fucking sleeping on Villains. This is just an incredibly blinding 48 minutes that showcases all of the dynamics seen on your typical Queens of the Stone Age record, but it's in such a nice, tight package. I think that the marriage of Josh Homme and Mark Ronson melds together beautifully. After the shit they did with Lady Gaga, I was incredibly excited to see what they would pull together with this project, and I think it paid off for them in spades. I think that John Theodore's drums are, like I said, some of the best that the band has seen since Dave was in the band. I love the way this record progresses. I think Feet Don't Fail Me is one of the best opening cuts they've ever written outside of You Think You're a Millionaire. I think it just sets the record off on this great swagger that the band carries incredibly well throughout the record. I think that the shift from Domesticated Animals' hypnotic guitar tones into Fortress's really ambient, softer moment into the great rager that is Head Like a Haunted House provides a good dynamic just in those 3 tracks alone. This is such a good fall record. I love the synthetic textures drenched throughout it. I actually wrote a review on Rate Your Music for this record in full, so if you want to read that, go ahead. I give a lot of defense for it. I think this record is stellar. It's one of the records I revisit from them a lot, partially because it has a lot in such a tight little package. I feel like if you enjoy Lullabies to Paralyze, or if you enjoy records like Air Vulgaris or Like Clockwork, you would enjoy Villains. The critical masses don't seem to agree, and that's probably the hottest take I have in this video, but this is a good record that I feel like people still really sleep on, to me personally. As they do with Air Vulgaris, I think this is their most underrated record. I mean, it is like a, better established, it's like a proto-Villains in the way that it constructs itself. It has a lot of the same crunchier riffs, like on the, again, kind of hypnotic Turner on the Screw, or the really thick and dense 666, or there's even some, like, swankier, softer moments like Make It With You. There's a lot of dynamics in this record that I feel like set itself apart from their earlier material. You know, while Lullabies to Paralyze was kind of a transition of sorts, Air Vulgaris really transformed them into this rock band with a lot of different flavors, and that's one of the things I love about it. You know, tracks like 3s and 7s are really great, tight rock jams. You know, there's a lot of dynamics within the band on this record, and I feel like everyone pulls together some fantastic performances, whether it's Joey Castillo's drums or Josh Homme's, you know, signature guitar work. You know, and I feel like if you like Lullabies to Paralyze, but you want something a little more, I would recommend this record. I don't think it's a good starting point. Their starting points, to me, are their best records, but I feel like if you want something a little more, like if you like Songs for the Deaf, but you want something a little more varied, I would go to Air Vulgaris and then Villains if you like this record. There's a good amount of energy, but there's also some palatable density that is essential to where their sound goes, and I love this record a lot. I think it is fucking killer, man. I mean, shit. This is like a Queens of Stone Age fans' wet dream when this record dropped. Like Clockwork features a lot of good shit. It is the kind of multi-styled rock album that they did on Air Vulgaris and Villains, done at its peak perfection. I feel like if you want a more dynamic rock record than Songs for the Deaf or Rated R, listen to this, really, and then go towards Air Vulgaris and Villains. I mean, there's that same kind of hypnotic nature experimented on Era and Villains on the opener Keep Your Eyes Peeled. I think My God Is the Sun is a rager that belongs on a record like Songs for the Deaf. You know, I think a lot of the more atmospheric textures like on Fairweather Friends or the closer like Clockwork don't feel out of place, and I feel like are the epitome of the sound they were aiming for on a Lullabies to Paralyze. They have other really tight, less aggressive rock shit like I Sat by the Ocean and If I Had a Tail. Vampire of Time and Memory is Proto-Villains and is this beautifully constructed ballad-esque song that has this real sense of dread and macabre in it that is just so good. Like Villains, this is such a tight listening experience, and I feel like if you want one of the more dynamic, interesting rock albums to drop this decade, listen to Like Clockwork. It is so good, so very good, and it has a revolving door of guests that, like I said, are a Queens of the Stone Age fans' wet dream. You've got Dave Grohl back on some of the drums. You've got Nick Oliveri back. You've got Trent Reznor back. It is such a good record. It's such a good record. I was trying to think of a different word to say, but record is the one I'm going for. It's tight, it's great, it's groovy, and it's just, oh, so good. I love this record a lot. Only has gotten better with time. When it comes to a Queens of the Stone Age fan's favorite record, they usually go to one of two places. They either go to here or to the next album. And obviously, the next album is clearly my favorite because I haven't talked about it yet. But I can't deny Rated R as one of the best rock records to come out ever. This is such a tight record, and it's got a lot of great dynamics within it, both lyrically and sonically. You know, you have your tracks like Autopilot, which aren't necessarily soft, but they have a good dynamic of good riffage and the lack of that. You know, it's got tongue-in-cheek lyrics like on Feel Good Hit of the Summer. It's got a lot of fun like on Quick to the Pointless. It's got Tension Head, which is just a blinding fucking rager that lets Nick Oliveri do his thing, and it's so good. But with all that said, and while I think it's a perfect rock record, what I think it does at its core is lay a good sonic foundation for them to build upon with their next release. However, I feel like if you're going to start with any Queens of the Stone Age record, it should be Rated R, because it's not so tied to its concept or its idea. It's just an all-killer, no-filler rock album that has the sound of a good Queens of the Stone Age record. It has a lot of the tongue-in-cheekness of a lot of their material, and also gives you a point of reference to a lot of their catalog, whether it be the ambitious ideas on Songs for the Deaf, or the sounds of Lullabies to Paralyze, or some of the sounds that are explored on some of the more multi-styled pieces like Aero Vulgaris or Villains. A lot of that still is tied to Rated R sound, and I feel like if you're going to start anywhere, start here, and then if you want more straightforward, or if you want more rock-centric stuff that doesn't have different types of music going on, go to your Lullabies to Paralyze, or your self-titled, or your Songs for the Deaf. Or if you want some of that idea, but with some other sonic ideas, then go to Like Clockwork and Aero Vulgaris and Villains. Either way, start here and work around it, because this is an essential piece of Queens of the Stone Age discography. It's when they found themselves. You know, Francis the Mute is when the Mars Volta found themselves, but this is where Queens of the Stone Age found themselves. With that being said, Songs for the Deaf is my favorite fucking Queens of the Stone Age record, one of my favorite records of all time. I've talked about this on my top 11 albums of all time vid. I adore this record. I think its concept is awesome. I listen to it on just about every long drive I go on. I think that Dave is the best thing, one of the best things to happen to this band. I think that he and Josh have this sort of chemistry with his drum playing and Josh's guitar playing. I think Nick has some fantastic bass work on here, on top of some killer vocal lines on the opener and on Six Shooter. Oh my god, this record is just, it's so dynamic in its own way without going so far off the deep end like your Eras or your Clockworks. This is, again, a tight-ass rock album that has a lot of cool shit in it. It's fun. It's a fun-ass record, and it's just one of the best rock albums of all time. It is so goddamn good, and I love it. I love it so very much. And yeah, I mean, it's a stomper from start to finish, whether it be the killer opener Millionaire that has good vocal performances from Josh and Nick, or the tight singles like No One Knows, Go With The Flow, or the colossal closer, Songs for the Deaf. There's a little bit of everything for everybody if you like stoner rock, and this is just the perfect Queens of the Stone Age record. Like, the most perfect Queens of the Stone Age record, if you ask me. Because it takes the foundation of Rated R and bumps it up to 11 with a cool idea and a well-executed concept. And that's why it's my favorite Queens of the Stone Age record. And there you have it. There's every Queens of the Stone Age record discussed by me. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to like it. If you like the music, gaming, and general nerdery that I provide, be sure to subscribe. I'm gonna get out of here. The next discography review will be decided on Twitter. This one wasn't, and I didn't talk about that because it's tied in 2 polls, so I figured I'd talk about it next. But if you want to help decide the next discography review, follow me on Twitter or join the Patreon. I put the poll up on both. I'm gonna get out of here. I've been ViralRack. You guys have videos, thoughts, and situations, and I'll see you another day.